Apple's new investments in artificial intelligence, Elon Musk versus OpenAI, and ERP trends from a tech pioneer. Those are just a few of the topics we're going to cover here in episode 162 of Transformation Ground Control.
Welcome to Transformation Ground Control. Ground Control. The podcast that covers everything related to digital transformation. This podcast features technology agnostic and international discussions related to digital strategy, software selection, implementation, change management, business process optimization, and everything else you need to know to make your digital transformation project successful. Whether you're embarking on an ERP implementation, supply chain transformation, or any other business or digital transformation, this podcast is for you. Now, here's your host, Eric Kimberling.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Hello, welcome to Transformation Ground Control, episode number 162. My name is Eric Kimberling. I'm the CEO of Third Stage Consulting. We're an independent consulting firm that helps clients throughout the world reach their third stage of digital transformation success. And I'm here with my co-host, Darian Chwialkowski. Darian, thank you for being here.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Great to have you. Great to have you, the audience, here today. New episodes every Wednesday. You can find us at transformationgroundcontrol.com. This podcast covers everything related to digital transformation, so excited for today's episode. We're going to cover a few things. We're going to get into Apple's new investments in AI, and they've already been investing in AI, but as we'll discuss, they are also redirecting or diverting some of the money they were investing in electric vehicles. They're diverting that to artificial intelligence, so we'll talk about that. We'll also talk about Elon Musk versus OpenAI, and we're also going to get to some audience questions. Actually, we'll start off with the audience questions. I'm going out of order here today. It's a rough start already. We're going to start with audience questions from social media. Then we'll get into Apple investments in AI. Then Elon Musk versus OpenAI. And then speaking of AI and emerging technology trends, we're going to have a guest on who I'm very excited about, Baan, who is the founder of Baan, which is one of the original ERP software vendors from the late 70s into the 90s. It was a very prominent ERP software vendor. He's up to other stuff these days, and he's still very close to the enterprise tech space. So we're going to talk to him about trends in ERP, as well as just sort of how he got to where he got today and his history in the ERP space, but as well as where we're headed in the future with some of the trends and some of the shakeups and disruptions that are happening in the ERP and enterprise technology space. So be sure to stick around for that. That'll be Baan here on later in the show. But before we get to that, Darian, what are some of these questions that you've got from our audience here today?
Yeah, lots of good questions from our audience today. The first one is, for companies considering a best of breed approach, what is the impact on total cost of ownership compared to a single ERP solution?
Good question. I suppose it depends on how good of a fit either solution is, whether it's the best of breed or single ERP. On one hand, ERP software, traditional integrated ERP systems, can save you some money because you don't have to do as much integration and as much tying together different systems. Although I will say you have to be careful because you still are doing a lot of integration even between modules, and a lot of these software vendors have bought third-party providers that they have to integrate with anyway, but they have all these different systems to help you hopefully buy from one single vendor. And we're going to talk about vendor lock-in actually later in this episode with Baan, and even after that we'll talk more about vendor lock-in as well. But ERP vendors want to lock you in, and they'll make you think that they have a fully integrated solution, but oftentimes they have third-party systems or even their own modules take a lot of work to integrate. So I think sometimes this cost savings there is a bit overstated, but that's the way ERP softwares will position it. ERP software vendors will position it, but there is some cost savings potentially of not having to integrate multiple systems. Best of breed, on the other hand, yes, you might have to spend a little bit more time and money integrating multiple systems. Might be a little bit harder to manage. There might be questions about single source of truth and all that sort of stuff. But generally speaking, if you do it right, best of breed can be a better functional fit, which means it's going to be easier to deploy. It means your users or your people and your business processes are going to be less resistant to the new technology, and chances are pretty high that you're going to get more business value out of best of breed scenario. So even if it costs you slightly more potentially, which I would argue may not be the case, but even if it did cost you slightly more, chances are fairly high that you're going to get a better ROI because you have higher business benefits potentially. And again, this all assumes that you find the right functional solutions for different parts of your business, and then you effectively tie them together. Of course, if you find technology that doesn't fit your business either way, whether it's single ERP or best of breed, that's going to cost you a lot and create a lot of risk. So the assumption here is that you find the right software and you do your due diligence behind that. But honestly speaking, though, I don't know that there's a huge advantage to ERP systems. In many cases, we see best of breed outperforming in terms of ROI. And actually, we're going to come back to that best of breed concept among other trends that we'll talk about with Baan later in this episode. We'll also talk about composable ERP and microservices and things that are sort of like best of breed or at least alternatives to traditional ERP. And we'll talk about where the business value lies in those sorts of deployments too. So that's a long way of saying that it depends.
Yeah, it all depends. That's a great take, Eric. What about this second question from our audience? It is, I think AI will assist consultants in implementation, purpose configurations, faster testing, analyze processes, and propose more efficient ones. He also thinks that AI will replace 80% of ERP, and he's wondering if you agree or disagree with this.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of opportunity for AI to make implementations more effective. Even if you just look at writing the code, if you've got to do some development work and you've got to write code, or you've got to do some sort of custom reports, or you've got to do some sort of configuration, you could be using AI to do a lot of that stuff. And right now, you have a lot of highly paid people, even if you offshore it or you find a low-cost country to do that work for you, you're still paying humans to do that manual work. And I don't know that we're anywhere close to having AI completely replace humans in implementations. In fact, I think we're nowhere near that. I don't know if we'll ever get there, to be honest, but there is an opportunity for us to cut out some of that low-value type stuff in implementations because, we spend so much time and money implementing technology, but we don't spend enough time and money on the operational and the human side of things. So if we could use AI to fast track some of this technology stuff that we get bogged down in, now we can focus our human efforts on validating, first of all, what we get from AI on the technology side, but more importantly, focusing on the people and business process side of it to ensure that the transformation itself is successful, not just, deployment of a new tool.
Yeah, that makes sense. And now I'm excited to get into our topics of the day, which are going to be about Apple and Elon Musk.
Yeah, absolutely. AI, you just asked the question about AI, and that's going to be the theme in our hot topics here. We're going to talk about Apple's investments in artificial intelligence. More specifically, they're cutting an electric vehicle initiative to take that money and those resources to redeploy to AI. And then we're also going to talk about Elon Musk versus OpenAI. And this is our attempt to try and get Elon Musk on the show. I'll be candid. Even though it's an interesting topic, we're also trying to get him on the show. So we figure the more times we mention him, eventually he'll have to listen and he'll hear us saying that we want Elon Musk on the show. So that's part of the self-serving part of it, but it's also interesting too. And then later, after we get to those hot topics, we'll also get into our main interview with Baan, who's the founder of Baan Software, which is now owned by Infor. And we're going to have him on the show to talk about the history of sort of Baan and the ERP space in general and how the ERP space has evolved. But more importantly, we're going to talk about where the ERP space is headed, some of the trends and alternatives to traditional ERP vendors, some of the risks associated with that. Certainly AI is going to be one of the things we talk about there. We'll also get into composable ERP, microservices, all kinds of other stuff there. So great stuff that we're excited to share with you. So stick around. We'll be right back with more Transformation Ground Control.
If you are aiming for transformation success, turn to Third Stage Consulting Group. Third Stage's independent and technology-agnostic consulting team helps clients define their digital strategies, define their roadmaps, and manage their transformations. With offices in the US, Europe, and Australia, our team helps the world's most forward-thinking organizations through their transformation pitfalls and risks. If you are embarking on a digital transformation or business change initiative, contact Third Stage Consulting to see how we can help you reach the third stage of transformation success. Learn more about us and download independent reports, videos, and other best practices at thirdstage-consulting.com.
Hello, welcome back to Transformation Ground Control, episode number 162. My name is Eric Kimberling here at Darian and Chwialkowski. And the show is sponsored by Third Stage Consulting and produced by Major Tom Productions. Thank you for being here today. And Third Stage Consulting is an independent digital transformation consulting firm that helps clients select and implement ERP software as well as digital transformation technologies. You can learn more at thirdstage-consulting.com. And of course, Third Stage is the company that I'm the CEO of. So thank you for checking them out in advance. So new episodes of the show every Wednesday. You can find us at transformationgroundcontrol.com. And you can also find the past episodes there as well. So, Darian, you've got some interesting articles here involving AI. What do you have in store for us here?
Yeah, so the first one talks about Apple's move to cancel electric vehicles and ending their decade-long saga with that and moving that into AI. So, for example, the giant tech Apple has recently announced they're officially stepping back from electric vehicles and redirecting focus into the rapidly developing AI field. This pivot reflects a strategic realignment, prioritizing immediate technology competitiveness over a long-term explorations into the automotive sector. Despite the allure of integrating consumer experiences with vehicles, Apple is honing in on its core and acknowledging the fierce battle for dominance in the AI landscape. Some questions that I have for you about this, Eric, is considering Apple's historical success with integrating consumer experiences, how significant is their shift away from exploring vehicle integration?
I think it's super interesting and telling of where they see the future. I've read recently that the electric vehicle market in general has sort of leveled off. It's not growing as fast as it was recently, and also not as fast as many had expected throughout the world. So I think that's part of it, is you have so many startups. Obviously Tesla is not a startup anymore, but Tesla has sort of dominated that space in many parts of the world, and all the major automotive manufacturers that are sort of the incumbent manufacturers all have electric vehicle offerings. But at the same time, that market's not growing as much. I don't know if it's just because the initial bump in adoption as a result of government tax incentives and things like that, if that is sort of taken its course and now, we're not getting to that mainstream level of adoption, I'm not sure. But it does make you wonder, though, does that mean Apple won't have a place in that consumer-facing side of it, to your point? Or does that put them further behind? Or maybe they just see something that we don't see, which is there's just not the opportunity that they thought there was. I don't know the answer to that. But I do think it's also telling that they see AI as being so important in the future, because obviously, that's where they're choosing to spend their time and money. And I think that there's a lot to be said there, because Apple, of all companies, maybe Microsoft or Google are kind of in the same boat here, but with the high level of adoption and penetration in the market of all of Apple devices, phones and watches and iTunes and watching podcasts on Apple Podcasts or listening to podcasts on Apple Podcasts, all that stuff, I think points to the fact that there's an opportunity for them to leverage AI at scale in a way that most organizations can't, unless you're, like I said, Google, Microsoft, Amazon, potentially, at least at that consumer level. So I think that maybe that's a bigger part of it, and they just see more opportunity in their existing channels and technologies that they can now use AI to drive more, whatever it is they're going to drive, more advertising revenue or more device adoption or whatever it is. But it does make you wonder, where they going to, does that mean they're going to miss out on the whole EV movement? So yeah, that's my thought there.
Yeah, super interesting. And to touch back on your point for the tech giants, in your view, what does Apple's strategic pivot tell us about the challenges and priorities facing tech giants in today's evolving technology environment?
Well, I think that's the key, is it's constantly evolving. It's changing fast. I mean, it's changing so fast now, like with AI, and there's so much competition in AI now, even electric vehicles. I'm surprised at how many companies are fighting in that space right now. So I think, it's sort of like an arms race, who can build the best AI mousetrap and who can best leverage mass amounts of data, and get that AI to add value at scale. Which, if you think about it, it's hard to do if you're a small AI startup, if you don't have data and you don't have connection points to, all these different points of data, like the way Apple does or the way Amazon does, or, whoever the big consumer tech provider might be. So yeah, those are my thoughts there, is I think that that just points to the fact that AI is growing, obviously, or else Apple wouldn't be investing in it. And B, it's changing very quickly. And they saw something a while back with the EV market that they liked, and now they see something that they don't like as much as they like AI. So that seems like a pretty fast cycle that's faster than it's been in the past.
For sure. And I want to touch back on your point you made as well about Apple has all the data and all the different phones, watches, people listening on all their different apps, everything like that. What do you think, what are some AI things they could implement that would maybe help people that are currently using Apple products?
Yeah, great question. Well, one comes to mind would be, and one thing that we didn't mention so far is Apple Pay. Apple has a payment processing platform called Apple Pay, which personally I love. I use it all the time because it's so fast and easy, and I always forget my credit card or lose my credit cards, which drives my wife crazy because I'm constantly losing them. Because I'll leave them somewhere when I pay with a card, so I just try not to use it. Anyway, that's beside the point. But what I'd say is, you look at Apple Pay and look at all that consumer data you're getting on everything I do every day, where I spend money. Apple has a pretty broad history of my consumer buying behavior, and so if there's a way to advertise, to target advertising at me based on what they're seeing, on the payment processing side. AI would be a great way to say, here's something that might be appealing. Now, companies like Amazon have been doing this for a long time. They already use AI and algorithms to predict, when you go log into Amazon, or Alibaba does the same thing for people listening that might use Alibaba instead. Temu, I think there's that new one from, it's not new, but it's penetrating our market in North America, the Chinese-based sort of Amazon, where it's a low-cost product provider. Anyway, those large consumer e-commerce brands have always done this, but I think there's an opportunity now to extend that AI mentality to things like Apple, with Apple Pay. Certainly, when you look at all the things we do on our phones, our browsing behavior, what apps we use, I mean, Apple has to know a lot about us, and there has to be some sort of profile that you have, that I have, based on everything you're doing on your phone. And so there's just ways, I would imagine, to target advertising to them, to sell them additional product services that are either direct from Apple or, through a partner that's advertising. So I think there's a lot they could do there to really extend their revenue base based on that.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's a super interesting thing that they're doing. I think it's probably a good move because everybody else is getting into AI, so it makes sense for Apple too, like we talked about. But I'm really excited to talk about our next subject, which kind of goes with AI, but it is about the Musk versus OpenAI.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Curious to hear about this.
Yeah, so this article talks about how Elon Musk initiated legal action against OpenAI and its CEO, Sam Altman, in late February 2024, so just recently. This lawsuit is centered around Musk's allegation that OpenAI has deviated from its founding mission of developing artificial intelligence for the broader benefit of humanity, and is now pursuing profit-driven approach, particularly in partnership with Microsoft. This case underscores tensions between Musk's vision for AI development and the direction of OpenAI has taken, especially regarding the accessibility and use for AI technologies like GPT-4. For some questions for you, Eric, about this is, the lawsuit highlights a critical debate in tech. How should AI be developed and shared?
Yeah, that's super interesting, because I remember a while back, I think it was probably mid 2023, over the summer of 2023, Elon Musk wrote sort of an open letter to the industry where he said, basically, he thought all AI development should be put on pause while we as a human race and all the regulatory bodies throughout the world sort of assess the impact of AI on society. And I think he's been sort of an alarmist. I'm not saying he's right or wrong, but he's been somewhat of an alarmist about AI and some of the negative fallout, the unintended consequences of AI. So, I don't know how serious people took that. I mean, people do take Elon Musk pretty seriously in general. Obviously, he's one of the most influential people in the world. But I think there were some people that thought maybe he was using that for personal gain to help him catch up in his own AI initiatives, to catch up to where OpenAI and some of these other providers already are. I don't know how founded that criticism is or was, but I think that might have undermined or diluted some of his messaging or his concern around it. And so when I look at this here now, I wonder, well, is it because he's struggling? OpenAI has some sort of unfair advantage, and he doesn't have that sort of pole position or whatever you want to call it in the AI space. I don't know, and I don't even know if that's true. By the way, he may have more of a leg up in AI than I think. I mean, obviously, we talked about consumer-facing products a moment ago in electric cars. Obviously, he owns Tesla or started Tesla. There's a lot of consumer data being captured through devices and Internet of Things in the vehicles that Tesla produces. So maybe there's AI stuff that I just don't know about. I don't use it. I don't drive a Tesla, so I don't know how it works. But anyway, but I think there's questions about is he just trying to get sort of a level playing field so he can compete better, or is there more of a true what's the word I'm looking for, societal concern that he has? I suspect it's probably maybe a bit of both. But I do think that it raises a broader question of, are we as a society and our governments throughout the world truly prepared for the displacement that AI is likely to cause? I don't think it's going to cause necessarily famine and mass unemployment and things like that, but I do think it's going to, at the very least, shift the way the workforce looks. Some jobs are going to get automated, new jobs are going to get created, just like when robotics hit the market and when computers and automation started to take hold, it disrupted the workforce. But I think the difference here is AI is evolving so quickly, and the mass adoption of AI has happened so much faster than any other technology I've seen, because it was just like a year ago, just a little bit over a year ago, when ChatGPT really caught on, and all of a sudden it was part of pop culture and mainstream day-to-day stuff. So much so that TV shows were talking about AI, and so we all kind of know about ChatGPT and AI now. And that's a pretty fast adoption. I mean, it feels like years ago that ChatGPT was a thing or started to become a thing, but it was just, maybe 14, 15 months ago when it really caught on. So anyway, I think it's worth looking at, and I think it's worth thinking about, what is, should OpenAI have that sort of unfair advantage when they are becoming more of a profit-driven company partnering with Microsoft? But it goes to show how important AI is going to be now and in the future.
Yeah, those are some great points. Another question is, in this lawsuit, it highlights concerns over AI ethics and distribution of AI technology. How do you think this legal challenge could influence the future partnerships between tech giants and AI research organizations?
Yeah, that's hard to answer. I have mixed feelings, I suppose, on it. I mean, on one hand, I think that it's important to let the market and capitalism drive innovation and adoption of AI and use of AI and things like that. But on the other hand, back to the previous point about the unintended consequences of AI, if it's true, or if the feeling is universal that AI could have a negative impact on societies throughout the world and productivity and standards of living, or just overall happiness, I guess you'd say, then the question becomes, should governments throughout the world start to step in and regulate? And I think they're already starting to in some cases. I'm not saying that's a good thing necessarily, but it might be necessary. The only problem then is that you'll start to get into winners and losers, geographically or nationally, globally. Some governments, might regulate so much or protect consumers so much from AI that maybe it's a good thing, but maybe it's a bad thing compared to what another country's government does. So that's the only downside. In AI, I guess, is, it's sort of like, maybe it's sort of a little bit like electricity or water. You need to make money distributing those things, but they're sort of necessities. And of course, you'll die without, water. So of course, we need water. We don't necessarily need AI. It's a nice thing to have potentially, but it does make you wonder over time, does that become like a necessity, if you will, for different countries? Much in the way, like in the U.S. and in parts of Europe, I know too, there's regulatory movements towards giving people the rights to cheap internet and Wi-Fi. People aren't going to die without it, probably not, but there is a movement or a school of thought that says that everyone should have a right to that. There's probably going to be schools of thought or movements in government bodies throughout the world that says everyone has a right to benefit from AI, and everyone has a right to be protected from the downside of AI. I'd actually love to hear in the comments, what the audience thinks about this, because I don't have a strong opinion either way, but love to hear what your thoughts are on AI. Do we all have a right to it? Should governments be regulating it? Should we keep it profit driven? Is it some sort of hybrid? I'd love to hear sort of what your thoughts are on that in the chat.
Yeah, that's a good point. that kind of plays into my next question, hearing what other people's thoughts are. But for this question, what do you foresee incidents like this lawsuit, for example, impacting public trust in AI? And what measures do you believe can be taken to build a transparent and accountable AI ecosystem that garners social trust?
Well, I suppose part of it is, transparency of data, because AI could be a good thing, but if the data that's being fed into AI is flawed or biased in some way, then that's gonna undermine public trust in AI. So I'm not sure what to do. That's where I think that in some ways you want the government to leave politics out of it, because I mean, the minute you start injecting or infusing data points potentially into AI models that are biased, that says, for example, if I were to go into ChatGPT and say, who would be the best candidate for Prime Minister of the UK? Let's just say that's just a random thing. I would have no reason to put that in ChatGPT, but if I did, let's just say, and I'm trying to just educate myself, inform myself on how I should vote in the next UK election for Prime Minister. What if politicians somehow feed in information just like they do now with the media or on the internet or whatever, and then do people start to think that AI is not a truly objective, universal sort of a tool, and now people are using it for their own self-gain and that sort of thing? Or even advertising. If you have advertisers from big corporations that can afford to influence data models to where if I go in and search AI, ask, what's the safest, the safest car to drive, and advertisers or big company names sort of bias the data and put in internal studies that aren't validated, for example, put that, somehow if AI is using those biased tools or biased data sets, now suddenly AI is not reliable and trustworthy. So I guess it's sort of like Google. Google had the same problem with advertisers, and you don't always find what you want on Google. Sometimes it's biased, sometimes it's not. But I'd say people generally trust Google despite that. So I don't know how founded it is, but I think we do have to be careful of it, because I think people maybe view AI as something that's more of a true arbitrator of truth versus Google. You're just looking for articles and maybe blogs and different opinions. AI has the ability to potentially turn biased opinions into fact. So that I don't have a good answer for that, but I think that's the risk you run.
Yeah, that definitely makes sense. Well, this was some great conversation today for the social topics and the articles. I'm super excited to dive in and learn from Jan Baan today. So
yeah, absolutely. Jan Baan is someone who's never been on this podcast. I've actually never met Jan Baan until today. I'll meet him for the first time. So excited for this, and it's someone I should have met, honestly. Being in this space for so long, I studied his software. Baan was the first software that I was exposed to when I was getting my MBA. I took some operational improvement and IT related classes while I was getting my MBA, and I remember professors talking about Baan, and that's sort of how I learned about ERP, was through Baan. So it's quite the honor to have Jan Baan on the show, who's the founder of Baan and has since gone on to do other things besides Baan, and we'll talk about both. We'll talk about his history at Baan, but we'll also talk about the future of the ERP software space and the enterprise tech space in general. So excited to have him on the show. We're going to bring Jan on the show here in just a moment, but first we'll take a quick break. We'll be back with more Transformation Ground Control.
I'm excited to share our newly released 2024 Digital Enterprise Operations Report. This free download is available on the Third Stage website at thirdstage-consulting.com. This report is truly packed full of technology-independent and agnostic insights for your project to ensure that you're strategically optimized for success. Download your copy today with the QR code in front of me, or visit our website for more details.
Hello, welcome back to Transformation Ground Control, episode number 162. My name is Eric Kimberling, here with Darian Chwialkowski. You can find new episodes of this show every Wednesday at transformationgroundcontrol.com. This show is sponsored by Third Stage Consulting and produced by Major Tom Productions, so thank you for being here today. Excited for our next guest, Jan Baan, who's the CEO of Baan, or he was the CEO of Baan. He founded the company Baan, was the CEO, left the company, and then went on to start two other companies, throughout his career, and he's going to be on the show to talk about both the past and the history of ERP software, but more importantly, we'll spend most of the time in the conversation talking about the future of ERP software and enterprise tech and where it's headed overall and some of the trends he sees in the space, which is really a unique perspective because it's rare that you get to hear from a visionary and a pioneer all at the same time, someone who's been in the space for a really long time, but has constantly been and continues to be a visionary in the space. So usually you can find one or the other, but usually you can't find someone who is both a pioneer and a visionary going forward many years later. So without all that being said, Jan, welcome to the show.
My pleasure, Eric. Thanks for inviting me.
Absolutely. It's amazing that you and I have never had an interview after all this time. We've both been in the space for a long time, and this is the first chance we've had to have an interview. So I'll be honest, I'm honored to have you on the show, and you're sort of a legend in the ERP software space. And I have to share a couple quick stories, if you don't mind, real quick, before I ask you to introduce yourself a little bit more, Jan. But for the audience's sake, a couple quick things. First of all, when I was in graduate school, I had a professor who was obsessed with Baan. He'd always talked about Baan. He would actually demo Baan for us in our classes to show us what Baan could do and how it related to operational improvement and business process improvement and automation. And this is back in the 90s, of course, and Baan was obviously a very prominent system at the time. So Baan was actually the first ERP system that I ever heard of and was at all familiar with. So that's why it's even more exciting to have you here on the show, because I've known about Baan since I first learned about ERP. So that is an honor. And then secondly, I have to share this with the audience. As we were preparing for this interview, just in the 15 minutes before Jan came on the show here today, we were just talking, kind of preparing the questions, and I learned a ton of stuff just in that prep conversation. So I'm very excited. I think you're going to learn a lot from Jan here today. So please ask any questions you have. So with that all being said, I know that's a long preamble, Jan, but if you don't mind, maybe just tell us about yourself. Tell us a little bit about you and your background.
I'm 77 years old and traveling long on the 45 years on the enterprise journey and starting Baan from scratch, being 20 years there. And then I quit because I came to the conclusion after 20 years with 5,000 people that I felt a little bit obsolete because everything we built was not built for the browser. And I quit, and I call it burn my shifts behind me, start again. And I invested my money in the cloud. And we built with a BPM, business process management layer. I invested in WebEx and top tier $100 million of dollars. And I saw that a little first in the slipstream of Baan. But then I learned that disruptive innovation has no chance in an institute. And I'm being more an entrepreneur than an investor. I need fun. And always I traveled on the roads where no one was before me. And I started again in BPM, and we built end-to-end processes. But BPM was too complicated. Even for the CIOs, they did not understand it real, but I learned a lot. And then I quit again. BPM, my chorus company, became part of OpenText, and I focus in what we call the knowledge worker. The API is connecting the dots. Maybe in BPM, the browser is connecting the dots. But now you go to API, and then you go to what we call big data, machine learning, the containerization, the microservices. And you do it no longer for the enterprise because the enterprise moved downstream from the silo to the processes on the internet. And now you go to Internet 2.0, 3.0 to the knowledge worker for the job to be done. Now, that's more my journey.
That's very interesting. So I have to ask you this, just as sort of one of the things you said that's very interesting is you said that you left Baan and sort of burned the ships behind you. When was this that you left Baan? This was in the late 1998. So 1998, you leave Baan, and part of your concern was that it wasn't cloud-based or internet-based, and you wanted to create something that was web-based.
Yeah.
And just put it in context for those that may not remember this, but 1998, the cloud was not, that wasn't a thing. That wasn't as widely accepted as it is today. How did you know, or why did you think at the time that the cloud would become limited?
I was an early bird in WebEx. There was no one. WebEx was a small company, Silicon Valley. I helped them in the IPO process. I invested 50 million, 60 million, later on more, and I allowed them to do a freemium. And even Zoom was not there when I invested in the WebEx because they sold it to Cisco, and then Eric came from there and started Zoom. Now, I was the early bird there, and I saw WebEx as a business tool, as more a tool to see the web meeting as a war room for the business. That was my drive. And then I learned, and in Baan, I see, little what you see when a company, I was on that moment, when we did IPO, I had 60%. But on the moment, I maybe the biggest shareholder, but still 35% or so. But I have a board and management. But management, in my opinion, I've given them too much freedom. They moved more from customer intimacy to M&A, and I should say more filling the pockets with selling divested shares. Now, that is, I make my mistake from in the beginning focusing on customer intimacy, and too much I was naive and let them go in what I call shareholders value. But then I learned shareholders, there are no shareholders because I did not understand them. I used to call them share movers because no one is holding. And it's a problem. I was so naive, I was thinking these people are for life with me, but no, they're gambling with you. Now, and that's the element, the challenge with the VCs, etc., is kind of real, not so attractive for the disruptive innovation. And therefore I quit. And with my WebEx knowledge and top tier knowledge, top tier was the first XML portal. Later on, I sold it to SAP. We sold it for 400 million to SAP to replace their NetWeaver. And it was also tremendous technology. I was founded already, but I saw it was not complete enough. And it was not consumerized enough. And then we moved what we today see, like the REST API, like infrastructure as a service, like what you see in a Google, in an Amazon, etc. Now, the middleware layer for ERP is thinking, I'm saying often. It's not, it's architectural done by the knowledge of the last century of ERP, but not done with a native cloud. Now, that's what I learned.
Right.
To start again in the cloud, you have to do a totally other way of thinking than in on-premise transactional ERP.
Right.
And realize, Erik, everything is stored in the transaction and is stored in concrete. Now, in BPM, the rules were already decoupled, and 1 second before the transaction you could change the rules. Now, in MRP, it's too much stored in concrete. And you have no choice. I put the process through your throat.
Right.
That was the biggest, limitation. Is it on ERP? But so far good enough if it is backend, but not good enough if it goes downstream.
Right. That's very interesting. I wish I could say that back in 1998, I too predicted the advent of the cloud, but I did not. I was still trying to figure out what ERP software was.
I worked with the guys of I2 also, but they were more on the rule engines.
Right. Interesting. So what about Vanderburg, the company you founded? You're CEO of a company called Vanderburg right now. What can you tell us about Vanderburg and what are you up to these days?
In Vandenberg, I had a castle, the Vandenberg. It was my also my holding company. But then in the mid of when I started BPM, we had this BPM layer, and I had even another investor in it. But I invested something new, what we call the beginning of microservices, and we built it already in the mid 90s, say in 2005 or so anywhere. And then my board was a little afraid in what we did, and I decided that okay, let me take it again, and I bought it private back, and I called it to my castle and therefore I call it Vandenburg, and it was my third startup. After BPM, we moved then to the second part of the internet.
Right.
And that was the beginning even of the workflow, because in Cordis I built silos. Sorry, in Baan I built silos. In Cordis I built processes to the inbound enterprise, but there is no supply chain. Even today, there's no supply chain because you are not collaborative, you're not dynamic. Now, then we moved to the workflow, and that's a part of the supply chain, to the collaborative workflow.
Interesting. So when you say you built silos at Baan, are you talking about modules? Like it was a modular system?
Yeah, we did it already nice, but the problem is the good thing is we have a unique point where no one came there. We had a custom order decouple point. And in the custom order decouple point, you could decouple everything, every type of engineer to order, make to stock. And we decoupled it after the warehouse layer on the latest moment. No one did it before. They have given the unique element, and we had our dynamic enterprise modeling where you did even the implementation stuff on the same element. That was unique, and every component was decoupled, and we built our famous Baan shell. Now, the Baan shell is now still executing an int for everything to the internet. That means In internet, maybe Infor is the only one who takes the same source code, the same functionality immediately in the cloud, because they have not to replace the code. The code was executed with a Baan shell to CPU, called the CPU now the internet. It was database independent, and it was operating system independent, called the operating system now infrastructure as a service. And they were able to connect it to Amazon like they before connected to Unix.
Interesting.
And there is Infor is still amazing today, and simpler. If that's the reason I was amazed that my old Baan product is still in the top of the ERP. Now,
Yeah.
and it is simpler than Oracle and then SAP to implement the complex variety of business processes in the enterprise.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. It is amazing that the product is still around and a lot of companies still using Baan. And I know Infor has been supporting it now for some time now.
Yep.
So rewinding back to 1978, you said you started Baan?
Yeah.
So 1978, you start a company called Baan. Why did you start the
Not
company?
Not Baan. I started a consulting company. I was a bookkeeper and maybe a controller. And then I came by accident in Silicon Valley in 81, 82. And I was selling already some microcomputers from a company called Durango in San Jose. And then I was the first one who sold this stuff what normally was used by toys, by Apple, etc. They used by toys. We use already an 8-bit 64K machine in multitasking, multi-user in the 80s, in 82. Now, and then I came at home by the CEO of Durango, and the guy saying, I'm now going to Unix. I say, oh, then I have to go to Unix. And then we built our famous Baan shell from that moment. But it was always done on, I think, state-of-the-art technology. All my competitors like ASK were on minis. And we were the only one were on microcomputers, and then we adapted the microcomputers. We adopt Unix from the beginning. Like today, Linux, Unix. We never went in .NET. I see it. Unix was far more professional on it, and Unix have given us all the power to build this stuff like the Baan shell. Now, we were in tools like Progress, but we were not selling the tools. But the tools were integrated by the application developers. That was unique elements. Right. Now, then I moved to India, and our real success is that I was already in the mid-80s in India, and very soon I had 1,000 engineers, where 10 years later, no one was even there. SAP, Oracle, they were even in the first 10 years not in India. Now, then there I have in-depth technology with top people. I paid them extremely high salary, but it was in rupees, and I was selling the product in dollars and in euros. Now, and I trust them. That was also the secret in Baan was that we were more an Indian company and link them together.
Yeah, that's super interesting. I mean, another trend that you saw before the rest of the world did, which is very impressive. And we're here with Jan Baan talking about the history of ERP software as well as the future of enterprise technology. We've got a lot more to cover, but first we're going to take a quick break. We'll be back with more Transformation Ground Control.
If you are aiming for transformation success, turn to Third Stage Consulting Group. Third Stage's independent and technology agnostic consulting team helps clients define their digital strategies, define their roadmaps, and manage their transformations. With offices in the US, Europe, and Australia, our team helps the world's most forward-thinking organizations through their transformation pitfalls and risks. If you are embarking on a digital transformation or business change initiative, contact Third Stage Consulting to see how we can help you reach the third stage of transformation success. Learn more about us and download independent reports, videos, and other best practices at thirdstageconsulting.com.
Hello, welcome back to Transformation Ground Control, episode number 162. My name is Eric Kimberlin, here with Darian Chwialkowski. You can find new episodes of the show every Wednesday by going to transformationgroundcontrol.com. You can also listen and watch to past episodes as well, all 161 past episodes. Again, that's at transformationgroundcontrol.com. So I'm excited to continue the conversation here with Jan Baan, the founder of Baan Software. We're here talking about the history of ERP software as well as future trends in the enterprise tech space. let's jump back into the conversation.
What I did already in the 90s, aligning IT and business, and we call it boundary spanners. And that was also another secret. There was a mini MBA where we call it these green beans, these youngsters were around the world, and we were able, they could do the pre-sales and implement this stuff. That was also another element they more also were instrumental for this dynamic enterprise modeling and all this stuff.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Very interesting. A lot of people joining from all over the world here today, everywhere from Spain, Switzerland, Spring, Texas, Kokan, India, USA, London, Ontario, someone else from the Netherlands, Paris, India, Hong Kong.
Okay.
So a lot of people from all over the world. Yeah, throughout the world. You're a world phenomenon. People want to.
Yeah, now with you, be together.
Yes, you and I together can get a good audience for sure. So one comment here that I think is worth noting here. I just lost it, so bear with me. There's so many comments coming in. I'm having trouble keeping up. But indomitable entrepreneur and a visionary. I totally agree with that. I think that you've already pointed out two things that or at least three things that you were far ahead of your time on.
If you allow me, I disagree with visionary. We have a saying in Dutch: vision is bullshit. You have to learn it. You have to learn it from mistakes. Always, I was traveling on roads where never was before me. But then, what you do, you try to do it first time good, but never was doing. It's always failing. You throw it away, and that should be done more in IT. You throw it away and do it again. That means vision, it's more learning from your mistakes. But some people say Jan Baan is learning faster than the competitor can make it. And that's the element. If you do it quick and fast, then you have time to do it again.
Right. Yeah. And make mistakes and learn from those mistakes.
And never do it too long, because the most problem you can have is source code. And what we did always, we throw it away, rebuild it for half the lines of source code with 2 times more functionality. That means I started with 3GL, moving to 4GL, event-driven 4GL with Triton, and we throw away all the times every module and rebuild it. And that is what we should do even today. It should be evergreen. Software should be permanently rebuilt on the new technology waves.
Right. Yeah. Very, very interesting. So what about, and there's a lot of questions coming in, by the way, Jan, about a bunch of things I'm going to get to here in a moment: composable ERP, AI, et cetera. So, but before I shift gears and talk about sort of the future of ERP, I want to come back and sort of finish the story here of how you've gotten to where you are today. If you look back at your time in the enterprise technology space so far, not just with Baan, but with the BPM company and now with Vanderburg, what are some of the biggest lessons that you have from the industry, and what might you do differently if you could go back and do it over again?
First of all, often you sometimes underestimate yourself, and too much I maybe have given authorization out of my hands and have given it in the hands of the managers. And they have a different view. I mentioned already, they're looking to the short term. And disruptive innovation sometimes takes you 10 years before you're there. And you have to be patient and do it this one. It's perseverance, not give up. And most go back, customer intimacy is the most important one. Focus and too much I make my mistakes and even allow them to go to shareholders value and all the other stuff, etc. If greed is drive you, and if it's only the money, then it's not joyful, but that is the most dangerous part in it. And we overestimate, because we are only down to earth, we are manufacturers. I learned what I do is a manufacturing process, and not so many people are doing it. I have the bill of material with all these components. I'm composing this one. I learned from Boeing and everything that I have to be like them, a manufacturer. What I did, decoupling, late binding, and all the manufacturing principles, I built it, I call it my own software factory. Now, and that is what we did in India. And again, learn again to go now more to UX and go more to user. In the beginning, we ignored too much the user. That's the problem. What we see with ERP, it's too much generic. My innovation is what you have to do, but now we move to mass customizing. To some elements, we make it generic, like a mobile, but on the same moment, it's becoming specific. And the power is, an enterprise should not be the same. Porter expected that with new technology we can be all different, but we all coming the same, like Fleming in SAP and in use the same functionality, and there's no differentiator. Now we should destroy this, and we should say. Take only a generic part, like in a car. Some things are generic, but your dashboard is specific, and it's a decouple point, and bring it there.
That's very interesting. So here's a question that sort of builds on something you just mentioned a moment ago, Jan. You were talking about how being a visionary is bullshit, and it's all about your experience and lessons from it. But maybe just building on that point a little bit. This is from Jan on LinkedIn. Jan asks, apart from experience, how do you predict well ahead? What are your sources? So maybe another way to frame that is, are there sort of like academic or just data sources you use in addition to your experience and your thought?
It's simple. Just be down to earth. Just do it fast, and do it again, and throw it away, and again pick it up, because you cannot oversee it. And the problem is what people are doing. They all build it, and all these elements are in. But go there first. You have a feeling. Should you go north or south? You have to go north. But if you climb the mountain, you cannot see it. You have to build a camp again. And if you go left or the right, you correct. You have camps. You do something between. Now, what we did was extremely important. That also in our software factory, that we were able to give. No, let me say, you have the freedom to people. We were saying, I'm dealing with intelligent people. It is already a problem. Because they are not so easy to handle. Now, we learned it's attitude of people. We learned how to make these people more innovative. That's one point. But then you have another point. If you have innovative people, they're sometimes introvert, or sometimes maybe you need a little autistical to understand it. Now, with these kinds of people, you have to cross another border, which is not easy. You have to make them also more that they take initiatives. That's the biggest problem. And then people are afraid. They say, I have to ask my mother to do this. Say, you have not to ask your mother. You have not to ask your boss. You just do it. No. And what I did, I went to all the people say, it is better to ask for forgiveness than for permission. You just do it. No. That means I've given all the guys, all the authority in the small teams. And that was, and then the third element is important. Is it me? No, it should be integrity. And it means it should be not done for me, for the team. And then you have to also reward the team and share wealth with them, that they feel it's all for us. And then 1 and 1 is never 3. You Americans are always saying 1 and 1 is 3. I like to have 2, and you can have 1, and then your problem. Now, 1 and 1, in my opinion, is 11. And bring it in. And it's only done. The core element is only the attitude. Give totally freedom to your people. Let them go. Don't ask, and then and every moment they share it, and it's coming, because in the beginning you cannot oversee it. It's nonsense. Everything you like to do in a vision is all nonsense, because it's never reality.
Right.
But you learn so much for your customer. That means important is then the customer intimacy part, and even try to have the decoupling generic part and the specific, and then you learn again. Right. In my opinion, it's more the attitude than knowledge.
Right. Yeah. I totally agree. You can always find smart people. You can always learn more. That's great, but it doesn't do you any good if you don't have the right attitude and the humble, the humility to learn from mistakes and that sort of thing. So those are great points. So just shifting gears a little bit, and I think you might have alluded to this answer or to this question already, but what are some of the ERP software and just general enterprise tech trends that you're most excited about right now, based on where we are in the industry here in 2024?
What we see important is still ERP. They call it often the mother of all complexity. It became extremely complicated. And what is the limitation of ERP? It's done in one database, a relational database, with tens of thousands of tables. Sometimes SAP is maybe coming to 100,000 tables or so. It's becoming complicated. And then you increase it. Now, then we moved to end-to-end processes, and then you do it on the process layer. Now, what we now do is realize that in Kubernetes, in this containerization, you can build very small parts and unite them together. And it is done, and you can do it 100 times faster and better to do this type of stuff. But most people cannot oversee ERP. That's the problem. If you have the kids from Google have no clue what ERP means. Now, therefore, you have ERP as a given. Okay, use it. like the engine. If you see a new car, the engine is good enough. Therefore, today's ERP is good enough for another 10 years if you decouple it. But only take it vanilla, take the bespoke out, and first start with the bespoke in microservice on the front end. Decouple that. When it is vanilla, you can implement it in 1 week for a new version. Now, you see now the Inforce, etc., try to come like a Salesforce, every 3 months with a new version, like a kind of evergreen. Okay, when you decouple the bespoke, you adopt it again, and then it's good enough, and then sunset it step by step. And then you bring those processes, you have the most value downstream for the knowledge worker, do this. You make more money to optimize the downstream workflow than to increase the backend. The backend is good enough.
Right.
But the backend never could do UX. The ideal situation is by ERP that you have no user, one user. There is no UX needed in ERP. The UX part can be, what we say, late binding, can be done in the microservice 100 times better.
Right.
The middleware fits not. Now I learned that, and then okay, it's not so attractive. Now, if you go there, then you can be maybe you could have an element. What we see, 2 elements: is ServiceNow on the one end, complicated stuff, and SAP the one end. Now maybe you can do it for 10% of the course with Infor and what we're doing together in this stuff. It's good enough for a Boeing was already good enough. I mean, the functionality of the core master production scheduling is still the same. All those complex, all the source code is still the same. A product configurator is still the same. Now, but from the downstream element, let's say from the decouple point, when it is from a decoupled point going from generic to specific, then the whole project model, project control can be built in microservices. Now, I did it already for a tremendous big automotive company with 22,000 users. We built, as a Microsoft killer, we built in a couple of months a totally project module, and it's much simpler, where you bring everything, the invoice there, and then you offload it. They deal with 40,000 SAP users. Now, and then you decouple the project module and bring it more downstream. Now, this is the way of thinking, respect it, and then step by step sunset and decouple it.
Right. We're here with Jan Baan talking about the history of ERP software as well as the future of enterprise technology. We've got a lot more to cover, but first we're going to take a quick break. We'll be back with more Transformation Ground Control.
Interested in working for a company that truly values your unique skills and experience? Here at Third Stage, we don't hire based on resumes alone. We look at the full candidate, experience, and willingness to provide excellent service for our clients. Within a technology independent and agnostic consulting firm, you have the opportunity to learn across industries with a diverse group of clients. Our consultants also have the opportunity to diversify their portfolio and learn across technology systems. If you're interested in joining a high-growth entrepreneurial organization, please reach out to us at work@thirdstage-consulting.com.
Hello, welcome back to Transformation Ground Control, episode number 162. My name is Eric Kimberly, here with Darian Chwialkowski. You can find new episodes of the show every Wednesday by going to transformationgroundcontrol.com. You can also listen and watch to past episodes as well, all 161 past episodes. Again, that's at transformationgroundcontrol.com. So I'm excited to continue the conversation here with Jan Baan, the founder of Baan Software. We're here talking about the history of ERP software as well as future trends in the enterprise tech space. Let's jump back into the conversation. This is from Kyler on LinkedIn. She says, Eric and Jan, is traditional ERP dying? What are your thoughts?
What is dying is refreshing. Let's first say, but ERP, because realize ERP is built in the first IT wave, is the wave of databases. Now, but ERP should belong to big data. Now, what I'm now doing, I'm not dying ERP, I'm optimizing a little. The old man I give them a car or so. That means immediately I take the database of ERP, immediately in BigQuery of Google. Now, and that means, and then I can, but I have to go, but if you take a process out of ERP, most people do not understand it, you should be the finishing element back. Now, what we learned in BPM, if you take some things out of ERP, the result for the compliance part should be back. Now, there are principles, and then ERP can go another 10 years, but never do a big bang. Never. And then it brings also the complexity. But I can't. We have the Dutch government. They spend $1 billion to replace an SAP system now. And if you see all these big companies, they pay hundreds of millions. Now that is nonsense. It could be done for 10 times cheaper if you look to it. If you do it smart.
Yeah. It's interesting. So is what you're advocating then, or suggesting, is that ERP, we need to rethink what ERP is. So ERP, in other words, is a back office database transaction
administrative, kind of an administrative system.
Okay. So we're trying,
but it's complicated. If you go to the generic part, the biggest part we built was, say, master scheduling, but not so many people are using this. But all to have to understand all those elements, decoupling elements, it's good enough. Because ERP, the data, the latency of ERP, the data, if you have it once a day, it's good enough, but you should pick it as one version of the truth. And that's what people cannot do this. That means if you adopt the work from the front end, you should adopt maybe once a day or once a week an ERP run, a master scheduling. That's good enough. It makes no sense to have an ERP run every 5 minutes. Now, you should have, but on the end, we take our IoT sensors, and they are real time, and I take it in a microsecond. Now, and I do that in the workflow. That can be, if you do this in ERP, it's 1,000 times too complicated. That means in late binding, you never have to do this type of workflow elements. And let me say this way, ERP is only handling a transactional element. But downstream, you have the human, and the human is not involved in ERP. Now, then downstream, you can take you have these state machines and do it. Now, do it downstream, then you take the human and you combine this one. It means if the flow, see it as a car, the engine is below, but you travel there more with anywhere, with Google, where to go there, and it's on your dashboard. And there you need it every second.
Right. So can you help us understand then, and this is something that you and I talked about prior to this interview, but the difference between microservices and composable systems? You pointed out that there's a distinction there. How would you summarize that distinction?
Some people say ERP is composing, can never be composing, because there's no human involved. ERP is only a transaction. And if you have no big data, you have even no version release control. You have only the data from yesterday, but not from half a year ago. In big data, you see all the other elements. And you never can make it composing. When you do it composing, you adapt it as the engine, and you do it on your dashboard in the microservices. But then you need dynamic, semantical microservices, and then with Kubernetes, and then the big data is involved. Everything is Google providing me now. What I spent hundreds of millions in the last century, in the early days, to do it myself. Now you have to understand it. But it's all consumerized. The REST API is so much consumerized, everything is here. It's so simple to do here. This consumerized. And this composing. And composing is not need in enterprise. Composing is always need by the job to be done.
Right.
See, if you do it too early, then you mislead people. Why should you compose when you work with 50 people in a factory, in a department? No, it means only when you sell or assemble the product. Now, composing is human.
Right.
And in that human composing element is downstream, is workflow. And some people, they misunderstand the power of microservices. They are strong. The tools in microservices are by 100 times stronger than the tools I built in ERP in the 90s. I mean, I can easily build a complete ERP system in a year time. But why should I do it? I can make much more money to let ERP stay in the backend because it's not so improving there so much, and edit it to the front end. ERP is good enough where it is today. It's people understand the processes. Yeah, they're not changing it. But over time, when we go to, say, 3D printing, but that failed, then you need no ERP. You need only PDM. But maybe over time, and what we did, we learned ERP and PDM. Maybe PDM is becoming more important than ERP to link the design. But you need, in the microservice, I have to bring everything together.
Right. Yeah, that's super interesting. And that's something I think is hard to understand in our space, because the software vendors love buzzwords, and so do the industry analysts. And so they'll use words like composable, microservices, and I hear those used somewhat interchangeably at times. And I think that's it helps to understand that difference.
And Erik, you know even more than I know that only a few people understand ERP. Even for a CIO, it's hard to understand the processes of ERP. There are sometimes more CPO is a Chief Procurement Officer than Chief Innovation Officer, and that is more the problem. And over time, IT will disappear and will be part of the business.
Yeah.
And what I'm doing now, I'm dealing with the business owner and with the business analyst. Immediately, I can generate already 70 or 80% source code in Java. That's what we do in our rapid tools. I mean, aligning IT and business is the core element.
Right.
Maybe the business engineer only understands the spreadsheet, but they can use the rules already in the spreadsheet. That means, and if I can, not with the program, but with the tools, adopt these rules already, then even I have not come over 6 months back. No, the business owner engineers is already responsible for the rules, and other times IT did not understand. Coming back, there were the problems in the past.
Right.
You have to. The only element what you have to do is to simplify.
Yeah. Yeah. And it seems like too, a lot of organizations are stuck in the patterns of the past. So in other words, I have an old ERP system, so therefore I need to replace my ERP system. That's the mentality you hear. Back to your point about Chief Procurement Officer, I think
nice Ellen van Gastel, they say, will Baan be eventually phased out and merged into Infor? I can call it again Baan. My name is Baan. And maybe even we can merge together. I'm still Baan, and I have the right to say Baan, but could be maybe a good suggestion. But okay, a little joke.
Right. That's a great point and question. I was going to show that, and I'm having trouble. There it is. Thank you, Gassan. Great question there. I have another question that's sort of building on what you just were saying, Jan. I'm going to go find it here in a moment. And this is from Cyprian. I hope I'm pronouncing your name right. On LinkedIn, says, what are the key differences between today's ERP and those from both your era, the 1990s? And I know you've already talked about microservices and cloud.
The difference between the ERP is nothing. And when ERP is going to the cloud, it's pseudo cloud. Realize that the same source code, and even as a problem, even today, most vendors have less functionality in the cloud than on-premise. And the core and 80%, 70% of the core elements are built in the 90s and the 80s, and are still the same. Because the people today do not understand this source code to do this one therein. That's the biggest problem. And therefore we have to deal with it. But the good stuff is you see the input and the output, and with big data, if you take the data with big data, if you adopt, there are some things like the containerization, and if you bring AI on it, then you bring end to end from ERP to the knowledge worker, what it makes sense. Today, ChatGPT, etc., like Microsoft, they have 10 petabytes of data, but only unstructured, and they have no clue what ERP means. All the ERP data is hidden for ChatGPT. Therefore, they have no meaning. And we overvalue too much AI on this moment as only a suggestion for maybe a lawyer or so or some things, but not for an engineer on this moment. We have to be serious, and there's some things to do.
Well, I appreciate the fact that you mentioned something I always say, but I get a lot of criticism for, which is the functionality of cloud ERP systems is not as strong and doesn't have the same functionality as some of the on-premise legacy systems. I say that, and software vendors don't like when I say it. I'm not selling software, so I could just say what I think.
But Erik, that's due then from the ERP part, because the ERP part is done with the architectural view, because they're locked in from the 90s. But if I'm looking where I'm building application in Google, they are by far stronger to build every type of application. But the knowledge to do this is most times not available there. That means the best people of Google are smarter in gaming and all these other elements.
Right.
But if you use the same tools, you can make a 5 times stronger ERP. But ERP is good enough if you bring it to the end-to-end process, to the workflow. I should say, guys, you all can make a fortune of money, and the best tremendous element for manufacturing companies if we connect the chain. And if we simplify the ERP part, take the customization out, and then even connect other stuff like BPM. Do nothing with IoT. Do it on the latest moment. If you talk machine to machine, the operator need a tool in the workflow and not an ERP. Now, if you make then a mistake, all these people are building in BAPIs. BAPIs, what is this? Now, you have to be very old and people to do this. Now, it is nonsense to do this.
Right.
You should go take then Java and take then elements in a front end stuff. But when it is done, always every product, even in a Tesla car, you have 3 technology waves. You have still material, you have electronical, you have software. Now, there's nothing wrong with ERP. It's maybe the old, is maybe the engineering stuff, but if you see it as different technology waves in one solution and decouple them.
Right. We're here with Jan Baan talking about the history of ERP software as well as the future of enterprise technology. We've got a lot more to cover, but first we're going to take a quick break. We'll be back with more Transformation Ground Control. My name is Eric Kimberling, and I'm the CEO and founder of Third Stage Consulting. Before we dive too far into today's content, I want to invite you to learn a little bit more about Third Stage Consulting, who we are and what we do. We help clients through their entire digital transformation life cycles, beginning with digital strategy, software evaluation and selection, all the way through and including implementation planning, implementation readiness, and the actual implementation itself. We're technology agnostic, so we only represent our clients' best interests. We do not represent software vendors. But having said that, we work very closely with software vendors, all the leading players that you can imagine we've worked with, both in helping clients evaluate and select them, but also in helping clients implement those solutions as well. So we have a very broad, objective, agnostic view of the market that is meant to really represent your interest as you go through your digital transformation. I also encourage you to scan this QR code right here to get access to our resource center. This resource center has a ton of information, a ton of ebooks that are free. You have access to top 10 software rankings, playbooks for how to make your project more successful, guides to change management, YouTube videos, all kinds of stuff that are going to help you through your digital transformation. So I encourage you to scan this QR code to get access to those resources. And please feel free to reach out to me directly to brainstorm ideas about your project. Even if it's just informally, you want to bounce around some ideas and get some informal advice, I'd be happy to spend some time with you. So feel free to reach out to me. I've included my contact information below. You can also find it in the description field of this video as well.
These things take time, Mom and Dad, they have a good life. But what am I gonna do with mine?
Hello, welcome back to Transformation Ground Control, episode number 162. My name is Eric Kimberling, here with Darian Chwialkowski. You can find new episodes of the show every Wednesday by going to transformationgroundcontrol.com. You can also listen and watch to past episodes as well, all 161 past episodes. Again, that's at transformationgroundcontrol.com. So I'm excited to continue the conversation here with Jan Baan, the founder of Baan Software. We're here talking about the history of ERP software as well as future trends in the enterprise tech space. Let's jump back into the conversation. Now, what about this? Here's a great question from Graham on YouTube. Graham says, I'm a little confused regarding Jan's comments on composable. Can he comment on how best-of-breed solutions such as Coupa are replacing OEM functionality such as SAP assets? So maybe, how is best-of-breed different from the other two things, composable?
We always did best-of-breed. And what is best-of-breed is like a car is the element of decoupling. It's like a bill of material where you have many layers. See, the same as a bill of material with many layers. And on the latest layer, you do also more the human part of it. But the best of breed is a best of breed of open source components. Now, many are gathered together with Amazon or with Google, but you have to understand all the other elements. Now, they are all, then we see then that infrastructure as a service is a beautiful layer. Why should you reinvent that, accept this one? But do then everything in the consumerized layer over there. And then you see the decouple point. But it's best of breed for me. It's also, you need a PLM system in a different way. You need another CRM system in a different way. But the problem is they have all the same data structure, more or less. Our data from a customer is 100 times stored in all the silos. No, that's nonsense. And they're all architected in the old way from one database. If you really understand the power of Kubernetes, and then you can do it in very small components, link them together and do the specific ones in every area. My grandchildren are building a show full with Lego in one day with all the modern stuff therein. See it like Lego. Mm-hmm. and integrate them. And then best of breed is only assembling. And take care that you never have a vendor lock-in. And that you care that you can replace one component tomorrow with another component, because that is changing.
Right. Yeah, that's really interesting. The vendor lock-in is a real risk and a problem, especially when you go back to the procurement comment you made earlier. But
But that's the problem. Where people making money, you have no chance. Now, and that is nonsense. What we do, we generate everything without a vendor lock-in in plain Java. It is so stupid, but you're locked in. Why are you locked in? These ecosystems from these big ones, these monsters are so big, they're not growing in revenue. They're only growing in EBITDA and in market cap. Why should you pay for, say, 2,000 billion market cap and all this stuff and this old stuff there? Now, look a little fresh, and then best of breed, you can do much more other things.
Right. Here's a thought or a question about the future. Again, this is from Jan on LinkedIn. I'm curious to hear what you think of this too, Jan. But do you think small, innovative ERP producers will win against the larger ones like Microsoft D365, Oracle, SAP, et cetera, in the long term due to faster, flexible ERP modules? And I guess I asked that too in the context of you've been through this before. You built a great product that then got acquired by Infor, which became part of a big machine, a big software vendor. Do you think that cycle will continue to where you get these small innovative companies that eventually get bought up and become part of that vendor lock-in that you talk about?
Yeah, but the problem is by the enterprise. The people are too much afraid. Mother may I. I'm not fired by IBM in the past. I'm not fired by SAP, and it means no risk in it. And we all are there, and we all are afraid to do some things. No one is eager to understand it. The CIOs are so afraid, on average, to understand this one because it's new. I don't know what it means. And there's a lack of knowledge. It's so simple, but they're all locked in this old world. That's the problem. And if you look to other products, you see small products, small companies, they do a lot. It should be better than to have one company with 1,000 billion market cap. It's maybe to have 1,000 unicorns around the world. Then you have 1,000 times more innovation. Now, but Nasdaq does and Wall Street does not like this one because they make the most money in these few ones. You see only the investments going 60% to 5 companies therein. Now, there is people are much too looking to save, because they're only looking to next quarter.
Yeah,
that's the biggest problem. Afraid to it.
Right. That's very interesting.
The question: how is rapid developer tool different from low code, no code? Now, let me share there some things. Low code is not the beginning of the end of it. There's a big limitation in low code. You cannot build ERP because you cannot do the last mile. And there's a problem with low code. You do very rapid technology for winning the POC, but the last mile cannot be done, and you're limited, and you go back to your SAP system. You need not low code, you need smart code. And what we do, let me compare it a little to autonomous cars. We expected already that the cars are autonomous, but still you need a steering wheel on the last moment. The same what we do, you generate a lot, but the perfect is the enemy of the good. On the last moment, you do it by hand. You need a tool that you can finish by hand. And this is the last element. Now, this combination should always be there. And I think that is the element that low code is more promising than it is in reality, because you often see that you cannot do the last mile and then you're stuck. And you are isolated in another runtime version dependent from your SAP systems, especially. I like more to be everything in one infrastructure as a service than again to isolate this stuff therein.
Right. Yeah, very interesting. What about one thing that you've spoken about in the past and that you and I talked about a little bit before we did this interview was infrastructure as a service and platform as a service. So IaaS and PaaS. What can you tell us about that and how it fits into the overall trends in the industry right now?
I see platform as a service like Silver, etc. is becoming already a little obsolete in my opinion, because it was the first stage of the internet. It's still like a transactional driven system. Amazing, you see everything in the cloud. The multi-tenant stuff and all the stuff are good, but you see still, why is it that Salesforce did not rebuild everything in an ERP solution therein? You see a little the limitation in platform as a service. Now, and then see platform as a service more replaced by microservices. And infrastructure cares now for everything in the cloud. Now, platform as a service was more a mix. You have to deal everything your own cloud, have your private cloud, bring everything there together. Now, I have no problem with the guidance. Let the guidance be there in infrastructure as a service, but that you have still a choice, that you are not locked in, that you are also there a little agnostic to what's going on there, but that you control it, and the business should control this stuff therein. And I'm more interested to build there in what we call this micro, but not so many people understand microservices. That you can link all stuff together, because you have to understand what is the element of BigQuery. How are you dealing with DevOps and all those elements? They are all composed in those elements. Now that's what we built in our rapid development platform. It took me 15 years to build that. After even I built Cordis. And throw away many times, but you focus more on those elements, and you throw away all this infrastructure part. Do it not yourself. You never can do it better than an Amazon or especially Google. For me, it's Google favorite, by far better than everyone. They control the data, and I'm not so much in favor with Microsoft in .NET in these elements where I see this. I'm not so much liking Office and all the stuff from the part. But okay, that's maybe a little personally where we're going in.
Right. Now, that's a great clarification. Thank you for that. And here's a question that's a little different and something I think is worth hearing your opinion on here. This is from Moses on YouTube. Moses says, what's the outlook for Oracle and SAP ERPs? As a business system analyst supporting an Oracle cloud implementation, he's interested in cloud AWS, OCI, and SQL. How should he plan his career path? And maybe a general question would be, what technologies should younger tech people be learning at the time? What are those hot things that are going to be really useful?
You go there. Some people say fusion. I sometimes say confusion. But if you look to it, we came from the middleware layer. It's more an M&A strategy to take everything together. No one is coming out, and you see, but they are locked in, and they're controlling. They're making a margin. Some people say the mafia is less corrupt than these two ones, because the mafia cannot make 90% margin. I saw that in the book, gross margin. They're making 90% gross margin from the maintenance. They say at your service, but on the same moment, they milk you. Now, you're milked in these monsters, and okay, maybe you need them if you're locked in, but I should say try to escape. If you do some things, they're in. But first, if you limit it only to the vanilla part, then you are not locked in. Never, ever, never do a bespoke element in those tools. Use it only when it was corporate, when it was the decision. You have no choice to change that. The choice was for Oracle. It's maybe good enough to do this. SAP is also, everything is in, but big. But all the other elements are not integrated. If you look to procure to pay, and all those elements are M&A components, but they show it on their their price list as a totally integrated element. But it's nonsense.
Right. Now, do you think, aside from Oracle and SAP as specific vendors, are there certain technologies that you think are going to be the future that we should be focused on early in our careers?
I should more focus on downstream microservice element and give it for granted in ERP, and over time something comes new, or some new elements will come maybe over time, but it will take at least maybe another 10 years before this is mature. See it as a given, but more important is try to understand it. If you understand it, then you have gold. It's better to understand the logic of ERP. Not so many people can do this. We need more people. It's not so sexy, but try to understand how ERP works. Then you enjoy it as the whole manufacturing type of element, the whole, how are we dealing with purchase, supply chain, and deal with this one. Be more involved in the logic, how it works, and understand it. But it's all done with too much traditional elements. Now it moved to the cloud, but if it goes to the cloud, it's still in the same principles.
Right. That's a great point. We're here with Baan talking about the history of ERP software as well as the future of enterprise technology. We've got a lot more to cover, but first we're going to take a quick break. We'll be back with more Transformation Ground Control.
I'm excited to share our newly released 2024 Digital Enterprise Operations Report. This free download is available on the Third Stage website at thirdstage-consulting.com. This report is truly packed full of technology-independent and agnostic insights for your project to ensure that you're strategically optimized for success. Download your copy today with the QR code in front of me or visit our website for more details.
I'm gonna leave it all out there and I'm gonna leave it all out there.
Hello, welcome back to Transformation Ground Control, episode number 162. My name is Eric Kimberly, here with Darian Chwialkowski. You can find new episodes of the show every Wednesday by going to transformationgroundcontrol.com. You can also listen and watch to past episodes as well, all 161 past episodes. Again, that's at transformationgroundcontrol.com. So I'm excited to continue the conversation here with Jan Baan, the founder of Baan Software. We're here talking about the history of ERP software as well as future trends in the enterprise tech space. Let's jump back into the conversation. What about open source ERP systems? Does that help solve some of the problems or limitations of ERP systems?
I like, even if I look therein, even going therein. Now, I like Rootstock. I know the guys very much. It's done in like not so much done in Salesforce, but it's a good element also to see where it is close in some areas to the cloud and do some things. Open ERP is nice if you can use it, but then you have with open tools, the biggest problem is that service companies like it and they charge you more. Why should you make from elements a mobile yourself? It means in some elements, is it then mature enough? But no, in some cases, yes, it can be there. But we have seen that for most people, it was not reliable enough.
Yeah, and it's a lot to maintain too. It's a lot.
Exactly.
You sort of have you're at the behest of.
Yeah, if Infor makes it a little cheaper, maybe they can be king.
Right. Another question here that I wanted to pull up is, I lost it. Actually, I'll go to one of the questions I had here for me from my list. Oh, it's AI. That's what it was. Someone was asking about AI and big data. What are your thoughts on AI and how does artificial intelligence fit into this whole trend of microservices and composable systems?
Very good. AI should belong on the latest moment brought in. We are making dynamic workflow apps who are based on big data. And we adopted all the underlying data end to end. And then we go to a workflow, and the workflow is driven by AI. And the AI is also in Google, where we see in Gemini, etc. Is all in the infrastructure service layer as more already as a composed tool, but also I should say as a productized tool. It's where you see it's all, let's say, productized in an extremely simple way. You can learn so quick this AI stuff on that moment. It's not rocket science longer more. That means in the beginning we were thinking with IBM and AI, and we need all these big people. No, you can learn it yourself, intuitive. No, this AI belongs in a microservice on the latest moment, because AI, you need it only when the human comes, because AI on its own is dangerous. AI should always be in the hand of the job to be done to execute. And what we do with this dynamic workflow, we facilitate with autopilot, how you call it, you facilitate the knowledge worker to do the job better. Now these knowledge workers have to figure out how these ERP systems are working. It should be the opposite. Peter Drucker expected that the knowledge worker can be twice more productive. We are making smart tools to improve the truck driver, to improve the front end, and you make the UI, the UX, especially for the knowledge worker, AI driven. And you give them suggestions like in a Tesla car, but on the end, the knowledge worker should drive. Right. AI always should be part of the execution of the knowledge worker, in my opinion.
Right. And not lost or buried in a back office ERP system.
And never do it in the back end, because it makes no sense. You need it not in the back end. If you see customer order decouple point, when what you built under the hood from a car is different than what you do on the dashboard.
Yeah,
AI is a tool on the dashboard.
Right.
And
you're not
building in the hood of the car, under the hood of the car.
Right. Yeah. Great point. So here's a great question that just came in that's sort of tied to it, though. Why are we so focused on making the services micro? This is from Niles on LinkedIn.
Anyway, how we call it, who makes as a name, and what is a name? I should say what we've seen on the end is ERP was only bringing a product, but now the product becomes a service. And what is in the service? This is then you adopt everything from the product. If you go to a hospital, you see also what GE is building or Philips is making, then it's coming to the supply chain to the knowledge worker. And we call that a service. And I say, now, a service is more, in my opinion, when the human is involved. And their ERP is becoming more when the transaction is hidden. You have the in the bill of material is maybe the latest moment of the bill of material.
Right.
Where you bring the service in.
Yeah, makes sense. So what advice for those listening that are in the ERP software industry or just the enterprise technology space, whether they're consultants or they work for a software vendor, what advice would you give to the overall industry for sort of how to navigate the present and the future?
First, try to understand how the factories are working and understand this one. And then then you can change. No, people are now isolated, have no idea, and then understand end to end. And have colleagues where you can collaborate with this one. It's only small team. It's collaborative working that you understand. And then tools, and then common sense is even more important than tools. And then step by step, you see you can improve. And then step by step, you see that new technology can do much more. But today, new technology is only used for simple products, for minimum viable products. But realize if you understand this and then try to have a little architectural IT understanding. IT is becoming part of every business. Over time, we don't need longer IT. IT should be embedded in the business. We are not doing it for, let me say it this way. Suppose you have a company from $100 million revenue, mid-sized company, and they do $10 million in EBITDA. That means, okay, and they have $90 million operational cost. Now, in this company with IT, I can make only maybe 1.5%, is 1.5 million. And I can change a little. But Peter Drucker was saying, listen, this company is doing 90 million operating costs. Maybe 60% is human related. That's maybe 50 million. If Peter Drucker is right, we can do it with half the employees. 25 million can become to the EBITDA. That is tomorrow's world. Yeah. We are using IT only outside. If we use it inside, now we're trading some things you can ship it here in the same day, but the goods are already half a year in a box. That means, but if those elements are totally united together, all our business processes can be totally different. Now, that is in tomorrow's world. We are in the beginning of, say, enterprise improvement. We call it enterprise. I was maybe a little wrong. I say, okay, joking a little, ERP should not be E. It's not standing ERP because it's no enterprise. And reality is there is no enterprise for ERP. It's only departmental. It's only a silo. There is an enterprise, but then it's a collaborative enterprise. I should call it, we should build collaborative enterprise apps.
Right.
To collaborate the whole enterprise, and to collaborate you do only where humans are involved. When the human is not involved, you can have transactional elements therein.
Yeah.
Now,
and
therefore,
we have to rethink what it means.
Yeah, and I should say, those in ERP, you are in a lucky position because the glass is half full. Try to escape a little step by step, but try to improve. If you understand it, then you're king. And then you can even go step by step, is what can be sunset step, what can we use, and what can we build already outside. And people should have a little to dare to do this. People are so afraid. They are so introvert. Don't be afraid to be fired. Don't ask for permission. Just do it. Right. And if you do it, everyone will offer you a job.
Right.
Because there is so much to do there.
Right. Now, is that advice for the software vendors, or is that advice that you would also say is true for
the software
CIOs?
vendors, you say the problem is a little is Wall Street, and anyway, filling now my pockets and what means it and log in. It's not so attractive to change your model when you have this great do no innovation. That is what Clayton Christensen mentioned. We go from predictable innovation to efficient innovation, do it with half the people and milking the cow. And we are not going to disruptive innovation because that takes 10 years. And I'm the CEO of a company. And over 10 years, my second follower is there and I have no benefit. I only benefit from the vested shares now. The problem is the top CIOs. Why should a person, by the way, make 100 million as an employee in it? But anyway, those guys making extremely big money only from the vested shares tomorrow. And they never will replace ERP. Why should they do this one? Because we should more open for disruptive innovation.
Right. What about for buyers of technology, people that are the CIOs or project team members that are evaluating potential technology options for their organizations? What should they know, or what advice would you give?
We know we cannot do the big things, but why are you not doing small proof of concepts and do it with young kids and say make only small microservices and prove it, and it's only small ones, and those people can make career in these elements and decouple that a little and do it with people who dare to take risk and to do some things. The better is sometimes youngsters, and the senior will guide them a little, and let the rest let it stay. Don't disturb it, because then you have a war. You have there's so much politics if you look to all these layers, and everyone is involved in these money making machines.
Right.
Now, be not slave of that system. Try to be a little innovative and do it small. Think big, execute small, and very quick. And what we do often, you do in 2 weeks, 3 weeks already, you make a service and then again do it.
Right. Now, another follow-up question along those lines, just as sort of a way to close this out. You made the comment earlier that CIOs feel like they won't get fired, or no one ever got fired for hiring IBM or SAP. Yeah. What advice would you give to that person that's afraid to do something other than bring on a big, proven, established ERP vendor that everyone knows, for better or for worse?
Now, I should say first, you are too afraid to change because everyone is corporate and everyone's doing, okay, follow it a little, but investigate and do some small elements to prove maybe you can go to procure to pay. All those elements who are downstream, take those processes and understand a little microservices. That's the biggest problem also with the big ISVs. The big ISVs have also no understanding. They have thousands of people. They do it in India. They're slaves in India. They're milking the cow here. And they're all part in the system. They are not motivated to go to where you can do it with 2 people than with 200 people. Now, and I should say also expect not too much from these big ISVs. They are not daring. They're following, and they're all in this monopoly, locked in solution. In my opinion, they are in danger.
Why is that? Or what do you see happening there?
Yeah, if you see the extremely productivity with these microservices compared to what you do in ABAP or so, or what you do in 3GL type of tools, and with also these tens of thousands databases and link them together, and what you do in Kubernetes or in these elements, it is a world of differentiation.
Right. And to your point, you get a lot of pressure from software vendors who want you to have lock-in because they benefit from that. And,
fight to it. Don't accept lock-in. And by the way, you have perpetual license. You have license for life. If nothing changed, why should you pay maintenance?
Right.
If you can decouple it, you need only one user. You bring microservice of it, it's good enough. Now, work is more better. We should be innovative, like an Infor or so. Maybe those people can be understand manufacturing. They can be a little more together innovative to combine this type of stuff. They could have already a good starting point. And then I should say, ERP could also use in healthcare. The problem, healthcare is more worse. And if you understand automotive, you understand everything.
Right.
That means if you understand ERP from automotive, you can even go to healthcare. You can go everywhere. And those principles should even, because that is even more worse, even by the government. The ERP principles can even go further downstream in also this type of industries.
Right. Yeah, very interesting. Well, I really appreciate you taking the time here today. We are out of time, and honestly, my brain is full. I've learned so much in this conversation. My brain can't take anymore. So that's part of why we'll wrap it up here today. But I do, all kidding aside, I do appreciate you being here today. Really, it's a pleasure to interview you, and I love having you on. I'd love to have you again because I feel like there's a lot we didn't cover that we could still get to. So if you're ever up for it, I'd love to have you as a guest again in the future.
Thank you, Eric, and even the audience. I respect the audience. It's nice to talk with all of you around the world, with all those friends where we see those who are in this world. It's good to have this community. Don't be afraid. Stay down to earth. and maybe it's more common sense, and it's not rocket science what we do.
Right.
It's not so complicated. Enjoy it, and at least enjoy the job what you're doing.
All right, we're going to continue this conversation and build on some of the threads that Jan talked about here, as well as some of the questions we didn't get to. So we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we'll cover some of those additional points and questions. We'll be right back with more Transformation Ground Control.
If you are aiming for transformation success, turn to Third Stage Consulting Group. Third Stage's independent and technology agnostic consulting team helps clients define their digital strategies, define their roadmaps, and manage their transformations. With offices in the US, Europe, and Australia, our team helps the world's most forward-thinking organizations through their transformation pitfalls and risks. If you are embarking on a digital transformation or business change initiative, contact Third Stage Consulting to see how we can help you reach the third stage of transformation success. Learn more about us and download independent reports, videos, and other best practices at thirdstageconsulting.com.
But we're never gonna survive unless we get a little crazy.
Hello, welcome back to Transformation Ground Control, episode number 162. My name is Eric Kimberly, here with Darian and Chwialkowski. You can find new episodes of this show every Wednesday at transformationgroundcontrol.com. And the show is sponsored by Third Stage Consulting, produced by Major Tom Productions. So Darian, what were your thoughts and questions and takeaways from that whole conversation? I personally loved it, but I'm curious to hear what you think.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, what a great person to learn from. I think he has so much knowledge to share, and I love being able to hear all of his different takes and opinions on the past tech space, but also the current space and what's going on with everything. So one of the points, I know we talked about AI a lot earlier in this podcast, but I really liked the points he was making about how AI can be dangerous on its own, and maybe we should just have it as a tool on our dashboard and not as the main thing that's doing everything. So I thought some of those points, and obviously all the other points you were making, were very interesting, and I think it was somebody that I can personally, and I'm sure others will learn a lot from that conversation. But I think there's some great questions that we can dive into from that conversation. So I'd love to just kind of continue on this conversation.
Yeah.
Cool. So one question that I have from this conversation is, what IT internal skills should we be sourcing in 2024?
Yeah, great question. I mean, I think, certainly traditional technologies like ERP and CRM and things of that nature are going to be valuable for some time to come. I think a lot of what we talked about with Jan Baan is stuff that's emerging, but the reality career-wise might be that you're still kind of focused on where things are today with an eye to the future, of course. What is it that we need to know and learn to be successful in the future? I'm still a believer that, technology is going to come and go and trends are going to come and go, but there's fundamental parts of being successful in technology that I think are important. Things around program management and understanding business processes. And Jan talked about that too. I think he said something along the lines, when I asked him what advice he has for the ERP software vendors in the industry in general, he said something along the lines of, go understand factories, go understand how businesses work, and focus on the customer intimacy and build products that enable that. And I think it sounds simple, and you would think, well, of course, I mean, that's what the industry is already doing, but they're not. I mean, they're building technology in a way that they know how to build technology that's built on their platform and architecture. Whether or not it's the right fit or makes sense for certain industries or customers isn't necessarily the end goal. He talked a lot about shareholder value, and he mentioned the word greed a couple times. And he's talking about, he didn't come out and say it this blatantly, but it sounded like he's saying there's sort of a conflict between profitability and economic self-interest and customers actually being successful and getting technology that actually works for their business. And he also exposed, a lot of the deficiencies and weaknesses of the ERP software space, which I love because I say it a lot too, but because we're independent and tech agnostic, we don't try to make anyone happy. We're not trying to make software vendors happy, for sure. We're trying to make customers happy and represent what customers' interests are. because those are the only people that pay us. I mean, our clients are the only ones that pay us at third stage, so we don't have skin in the game. We don't care what technology someone does or doesn't use as long as it helps their business. So I think that's a great point that he brings up, is that we have to look to the future of technology. So if I'm, back to your question, if I'm in the industry now and I pick a software vendor that's pretty prominent, whether it's Microsoft or Oracle or SAP or NetSuite or Epic or Infor, whoever it is, Salesforce, that's great, but I also want to be learning about some of the things that are non-technical that will help me understand technology better and maybe make technology a little more accessible and relevant to businesses. And at the same time, maybe pepper in some of those things that he's talking about around microservices and architecture, integration tools, platform as a service, just really understanding that stuff to understand what some of the options are in the space. And who knows, I think the more you understand broad technologies, the more value you can provide to customers. Now, the problem with what I'm suggesting is that the way the industry is built is it's built around specialization in certain technologies. And your job is to go deep into that technology and not necessarily ask questions about why or whether or not it's a good fit or whether or not there's good alternatives. Your job is to support that product that you're, whatever ecosystem you're in. So that's the problem, the reality of what I'm recommending. But I do think the more you can broaden your skill set and understanding of the world around you, I think that's going to be super helpful for technologists in general.
Yeah, that definitely makes sense. And I want to circle back to kind of what I was talking about earlier now about the AI conversation. So how will microservices and AI come together?
Well, that was really interesting when he mentioned this, because I hadn't thought of AI in the way he described it, around the flaw of having AI in your back office system that's transactional and whatnot. It's not at the sort of the user facing level. And the whole concept of just behind microservices and the last mile and composable systems and all the stuff you talked about, it makes sense you'd want to bring AI to that consumer-facing level, the generative AI and all that stuff, which now, if you bring it to the consumer-facing level, you can use AI and get value out of AI across all technologies and platforms you might be using in an organization. And it's unrealistic to think anyway that any organization is going to implement one system that does everything, and so you just put the AI model in there and you're good to go. The reality is you have other sources of data throughout the organization. Usually it's multiple systems. Even once you modernize your core ERP system, even then you typically still need multiple systems. For example, even if you deploy S4HANA, SAP S4HANA, people think of S4HANA as a broad, big, massive ERP system that can do everything. The reality is it can't do everything. They also have Ariba, they have SuccessFactors, they have Concur, Business Objects, all these different third-party systems that they bought. So if you deploy S4HANA, chances are pretty high you also get all these bolt-ons. And if the AI is sitting in S4HANA, now suddenly you don't get quite the benefit that you might get if that data, if the AI could access all that data. Now you could argue, well, you just build integration to the multiple systems and that'll solve it for you. I don't think it really does, because it's still AI built for a core back-end transactional system, to his point. It's not AI built for what I actually use on the consumer or on the end user facing side when I'm dealing with my end customers, whoever they are, whether it's a B2B business or B2C or whatever.
Yeah, that definitely makes sense. And also, one question that we got from the audience during that conversation was, I think specializing in any ERP could be tricky. Ideally, to be strategic, also AI can take over the specialist roles in the future, perhaps. What are kind of your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I don't know if it takes it over or if it just augments it to where you can go deeper and do more and spend more time thinking and validating versus creating, or searching for information. So, I guess the jury's still out. I suppose there are some roles that could be fully automated or, 90% automated or whatever the case may be, but I don't know that we're necessarily seeing it yet. I think what we're seeing so far is that it's just making people more effective. They spend less time looking around for information, especially with like generative AI, conversational AI. You can interact with the technology in a way that we never could before. And we don't have to go bounce around different screens looking for a certain field we have to enter to do a search or whatever. We can just ask AI, what were my sales last month, or how much inventory do I have of this SKU, of this SKU in this warehouse right now? And it'll just tell me. I don't need to go dig around in a system to find it. So that's not going to automate my job if I need to know that. It's just helping me do my job better, and it's probably just going to create more of that connection between technology and then the knowledge worker, like he talked about. It's sort of like we're taking the best of humans, we're taking the best of technology, and we're putting it together better by focusing more on that. So that'd be my take on it.
Yeah, that's a good take. And from this conversation, Jan and you were talking about the vendor lock. What are your thoughts about that?
Yeah, it's that's another thing that drives me crazy about the industry is there's such a profit-driven incentive for software vendors and all of their implementation partners and system integrators push the same message, which is you need one system, one technology. If you can put everything in Oracle or everything in Microsoft or everything with SAP or whatever, that's what they want. It supports their product, it supports their ecosystem, but it's rare that really works for end customers, and end customers get frustrated by that. And what's really interesting is with the advent of cloud, I don't think we've even begun to see the collateral damage that the vendor lock-in is going to cause. Because think about a big company that just spent 3 or 4 years going through a massive cloud ERP deployment, and now let's just say they've got maybe not one system, but they've got one core system that's doing 80% of their business. So they're pretty much locked in. I mean, it's going to be hard to rip that system out and just replace it quickly. So what's going to happen is it inevitably, regardless of who the software vendor is, their customer base is somehow going to outgrow or change in a way that the technology is not. And at some point, it's going to diverge to where there's a breaking point. And company A says, okay, that software was great for the last 10 or 15 years or whatever it was, but we've changed, we've entered new markets, we changed our business model. Now that technology is not a good fit for us. And so what are you going to do? I mean, how are you going to get out of the cloud environment? With on-prem, at least you had control of the systems and the data and the applications and all that stuff and the infrastructure. Now you don't. You don't have control over that. Your software vendor does. So now you've got to cooperate with your incumbent software vendor now to get all your data out of the cloud and migrate all the business processes and everything over to new technology, but yet you don't have the same transparency, control, and visibility into that legacy system the way you did with your on-prem. So I think the day of reckoning will come, I don't know, maybe it's 5 or 10 years from now, where you're going to have, I think there'll be big problems with companies that are trying to migrate away from a cloud solution to another cloud solution.
Yeah, that makes sense. And what do you suggest for companies that may be in that situation in the future?
Well, I'd say that, it starts now with thinking and assuming that there's a high likelihood that you won't use the software forever, because you probably won't. And so when you think about it in that context, not that you want to create doubt in your organization and start questioning, why are we deploying the software in the first place if we're not going to have it forever? That's just reality. Most organizations aren't going to use the same system for more than maybe 20 years. And if you get past 20 years, you're probably hurting at that point, as we see with companies now that are on systems from the 90s and early 2000s. So what I'd say is you've got to think like a company that's probably going to need off that system at some point. And so when you go into contract negotiations, you have to think long term. You have to think about not just what am I getting now, how am I going to deploy the software, which is where most people myopically focus. Now we have to think about how am I getting out of this contract someday? How am I going to get my data out of the system someday? What intellectual property do I own versus the software vendor? You have to think about all that stuff, assuming that you're going to have to get out of that contract someday. And also, there's the cost implications too. You have to look at those escalators and the kick-ins, because that's the thing with cloud that's really costly that gets overlooked by a lot of organizations, is that vendors oftentimes contractually have the right to increase costs, at a highly accelerated rate. They have the right to change terms and conditions unilaterally based on the agreements you sign. So you really have to make sure you have an attorney and a team of advisors that can think that way. They can think about the worst case scenario and the likely downside of what you're entering into. And someone that's been on this show a few times now, his name is Marcus Harris. He's an attorney that focuses on enterprise technology, ERP. He does a lot of cloud software negotiations, contract negotiations. If you search, even just search this podcast for Marcus Harris, you'll find 3 or 4 episodes at least that he's been on where he talks about some of those things to be aware of. So I'd go check that out, or just Google Marcus Harris, look him up on LinkedIn. He's got a YouTube channel too. Get in touch with him because he's a good person to help advise you through that process.
Yeah, that's some great tips for companies. And I want to go back to the conversation with you and Jan now. Do you agree with him that ERP software vendors are going to be in trouble in the future?
Yes, I do, actually. I do, but they might be able to buy their way out of trouble. And so let me back up and explain the first part. I think that not just what Jan talks about, but just all these different emerging trends in the market, whether it's AI, whether it's microservices, composable, open source, even custom development. There's all these different technologies and trends that could potentially disrupt and will likely disrupt big ERP vendors. And I think it's a bit of a house of cards in some ways that I don't think these big ERP incumbents can hang on to their dominant market share forever. And you already see it starting to get, they're starting to get, some of that chipped away by different software solutions. And all you have to do is look at some companies that have already done this, that have already sort of disrupted the ERP space, like Workday, for example, or Salesforce is another one. Those are two more established disruptors to the market. And what I think you're seeing now is you're seeing the whole Workday and Salesforce phenomena, which, they came in and did something better than the ERP systems could do, because the ERP systems can't be everything to everyone. So they go expose the vulnerabilities and build an entire product, an entire company just around that. And it's a threat to the big ERP vendors. But what also happens, and back to the caveat I said, which is they might be able to buy their way out of it, is that then you look at, well, let's use SuccessFactors as an example. SuccessFactors is an HR technology that was very disruptive because, a lot like Workday, they went in and provided human capital management solutions better than most of the ERP vendors could. And it was highly disruptive. But then guess what? SAP bought them. So now SuccessFactors is part of SAP, so they're part of the machine. So, I don't know, if we continue to see that cycle unfold, I don't know that you can go buy up and integrate and sell, and sell joint solutions or combined solutions. I don't know if you can go through that cycle fast enough with how fast technology is changing. Maybe it worked 20 years ago, 10 years ago, but going forward, I question whether or not the big incumbents will be able to buy up the small, innovative companies fast enough. And even if they could, they're not going to be able to get them all. It's like whack-a-mole. There's just going to be more startups starting up all over the place. So I don't know. As long as private equity's around and entrepreneurs are around, I think they're going to continue to chip away at the market, or at the incumbents.
Yeah, that makes sense. And wow, my brain is full from today's discussion, learning from Jan and you. It was great today. So lots of great talking points. I'm sure the audience feels the same way.
Yeah, I'd love to hear the audience comments too. What are your thoughts on trends in the market? Things that Jan talked about, some of the follow-up we talked about here. I'd love to hear just your thoughts on where the industry is headed, especially if you're not working for a software vendor and you're sort of outside looking in. You might have a different perspective or a unique perspective. So I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments there. So my brain is full as well. So with that, we're out of time too. But in addition to my brain being full, and your brain being full, Darian, we'll wrap up this episode. But I want to thank everyone for being here today. Thank you for co-hosting with me, Darian. And be sure to check out new episodes every Wednesday at transformationgroundcontrol.com. You can also learn more about Third Stage Consulting. That's the sponsor of this show, as well as the company I work for. You can learn more about Third Stage at thirdstage-consulting.com. And be sure to follow us on social media. Follow me on social media as well. So hope you have a great week, and we'll see you next week on Transformation Ground Control.